Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the White House. We just got done with the President's third State of the Union speech. My name is Macon Phillips. I work on the team that manages the digital strategy here at the White House, and we're about to kick off a really exciting event to answer your questions, speak to your concerns, address any issues that you have with the speech and the policies the President just laid out just down the road at the Capitol. Before we introduce everyone, I want to give you just a quick overview of what's coming up this week so you know. You can find all this information at whitehouse.gov/SOTU. We've got over 30 administration officials taking to various online venues to answer your questions. You can find out when and where, which topics, which communities at that page. I'm also really excited to announce that the Vice President is going to be holding an event on Thursday. So stay tuned to @VP for more specific details about that. And then at the end of this week, on Monday, the President is going to be answering your questions in a first ever virtual town hall from the White House. So it is an action-packed week, and it's going to be an action-packed night. I'm actually joined here by people from 22 states, many of whom came via our Twitter account at White House. They're going to be asking questions. They're going to be choosing questions from their followers. We've got some other folks here that are picking questions online. Here's how you can participate. Tweet at the White House using the hashtag SOTU, or just head over to our Facebook page or our Google Plus page and post a question there. We've got people checking that out and pulling in those questions as well. Before we introduce the folks here who are on the panel to answer your questions, let me hand it over to my partner, Ann Flippick with the Office of Public Engagement. Introduce yourself, then toss it around the table.
Great. Thanks, Macon, and thanks to all of you for joining tonight. My job tonight is really to make sure that your voice is heard. So I'll be here with this laptop, monitoring all the questions that are coming in online via Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and incorporating them into the conversation here. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Roberto, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Roberto Rodriguez. I'm Special Assistant to the President for Education here at the White House.
I'm Jennifer Palmieri, and I'm the Deputy Director of Communications.
And I'm Mark Zuckerman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council that works on education issues, healthcare issues, energy issues, urban, rural, and immigration issues.
I'm Brian Deese, and I work at the National Economic Council here at the White House.
I'm Ben Rhodes. I'm the Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications here at the White House and the National Security Council.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first question. This one actually came in online during the President's speech, and I wanted to start with it because I thought it really encompasses a lot of the frustration and fear that a lot of Americans feel. This came in on Google Plus from Ken Riddell, and it says, "What will it take to get people working again? And what is it going to take to get companies to pay these employees a fair wage? Wages have been stagnant for so long that it is getting harder and harder to actually earn a decent living. American workers deserve better."
Well, I'm happy to take a first shot at that. You know, it's a good question to start off with because really it goes to the core of the center of the President's State of the Union address today. What you heard the President talk about was how can we build an American economy that, in the President's words, is built to last. And a lot of the specific policies that the President was talking about tonight really were about this basic question of how do we restore an economy where we have good middle-class jobs, where we see wages increasing, and we have enough security for families to send a child to college, retire with dignity, the basic components of the American dream. And so you heard the President talk about a lot of specifics. I think we'll have a chance to get into them. But really, that key question is at the heart of what the President talked about. And I think the urgency that you heard the President talk with and the actions that he took tonight, in fact, to say that he was going to act where Congress won't, underscore the fact that we really are at a crucial moment for the middle class. And the decisions that we make here in Washington and that families make across the country are going to determine the question of whether or not we have those good jobs. So rather than getting into all the details, I think maybe it's a good frame to start off this conversation, but it's exactly the right question.
Great.
Okay, great. I've got actually one. So if you've got a question, stick up your arm. I'll come find you. Let me kick it off with one that we got in through the site as well. This one comes from Murali Krishnan Elangovan. It's on immigration. And the question is, while a lot of time is spent discussing the illegal immigrant problems, what efforts are being done to improve the immigration process for legal immigrants? While there is a broad acceptance for the need of an immigration overhaul, when can we expect some action in this space? Mark, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, let me just say a few things that the president talked about. First, he acknowledged, and he's been saying this, that the immigration system is broken and it needs to be fixed, and he supports comprehensive immigration reform. The second thing he talked about is keeping the border secure. And under his leadership, we have doubled the number of individual patrols that are on the border right now. We have more people on the border protecting that border than we have ever had in the history of our country. But the third point that he made there is that we have to acknowledge that young people who came here when they were very young, who are contributing, playing by the rules in this country, should be able to stay here and continue to make those contributions to work and to help make our economy better. And for those young people who come here in visas, who want to stay here and contribute to the economy and playing by the rules, should be able to stay and contribute. And those three principles he will fight for and continue to call Congress out to take decisive action on behalf of the economy and behalf of fairness.
Great. Okay, let's take one from the audience. I'll kick it back to you, Ann.
Great.
Why don't you go ahead, sir?
I'm Mike Russell from San Diego. In England right now, Ed Miliband is talking about wage inequalities and wage inequities rather than wealth inequality, and suggesting that the disparity between the top earners in industries and the bottom earners in industries is one of the key issues, at least for them. The United States has the highest disparate relationship of the top wage earners in an industry and those at the bottom. That's also resulted in a stalling of upward mobility. There's less chance for people to move out of the income bracket into which they were born now than ever before. So I'm wondering how the policies the President enumerated tonight might be enhanced by looking at wage inequality as a tax issue rather than wealth inequality, which gets the bad press about so-called class warfare.
Look, I think it's a very important question, and you raised the specific issue of the differentiation between wage and wealth inequality. But I think that, frankly, the disparity in both and the growing inequality gap overall is an issue that we really are going to have to take on as a country. And this is not something that's happened overnight, and in fact, we've seen these trends for some time now. But they are coming to a head, and particularly as we grow out of this most recent financial crisis, which has in many ways exacerbated those trends, both on the wealth side, because we saw for many typical homeowners their largest asset was devastated, but also on the wage side, because wages aren't growing at the rate that we need to for most middle-class families. So the key question is, what are we going to do about it? And I think one of the things that you heard the President talk about tonight is an idea that he's talked about before, but he talked about it with a bit more specificity, which is this basic concept that he's called the Buffett rule, which is that people who make over $1 million, the wealthiest Americans, folks like Warren Buffett, should not pay lower taxes than their secretaries or typical wage earners who work and earn their living through wages. And the way that he would go about implementing that is to say that if you make over $1 million, you should pay a minimum tax of at least 30% of your income. Now, that would go a long way towards addressing actually both of the issues that you're talking about, because it would ensure that those higher income Americans are not able to get away from paying their fair share, but it would also address the wealth inequality as well, because for a lot of the highest income Americans, the reason why they're able to pay very low tax rates is because of the preferential rates on investment income that we have in this country. That would be an important step, and I think what you heard the President say, and it goes to the last part of your question, which is really important, is this is not an issue of class warfare, and to him, it really isn't. It's an issue of choices and priorities and common sense. We have a serious fiscal challenge in this country. Our debt and our deficit is too high, and we're going to have to make real choices. And you have to stare down these choices and ask, Are we going to continue to have a tax system where the wealthiest Americans can pay these very low tax rates? Or are we going to go where students are forced to pay higher interest rates on their student loans? Or where seniors have to go without prescription drugs that they need? Those are the choices. And that's not class warfare. That's the kind of tough governing questions that we have to face. So the president laid out his specific ideas, and he's going to really push hard on that because those are some big and fundamental choices that our country is going to have to make over the coming months and years.
Great, thanks, Brian. We had a question just come in online from a high school student, and Roberto, I think this one might go towards you, but this is from Kevin C. in Santa Monica, California, and he writes, as a high school student, why should I continue my education when there are high-paying jobs that require little education and when I cannot afford my secondary education?
Well, thank you for the question, Kevin. You know, education has been a real priority. It's something that you heard a lot from the president about this evening, and I think if we're going to have an America that's built to last, we have to make sure that we have a world-class education system that really provides a pathway to college and career for every single one of our individuals, every single one of our students. You picked up on one of the challenges around college costs. And we know that, for instance, tuition and fees at our colleges across the country over the past 20 years have grown by 136%. So the cost of college is just far outpacing capacity in American families. It's still important, and we know that today more than ever, a college degree is the best ticket to success in this new global economy. It's the best ticket to really fulfill the American dream. And so the president's working very hard to make sure that college is more affordable for Americans. That's why we've invested so heavily in student aid and really the most dramatic reorganization of our student aid system. We've shifted over $60 billion that used to go to financial aid institutions, to middlemen and banks, and moved that into our student aid programs. But the president tonight also talked about the shared responsibility that America's colleges have to make sure that they're addressing college cost issues, that they're lowering tuition and seeking efficiencies and productivities to make sure they can pass along those savings to students. And states have a responsibility here too. It's important that states continue to invest in that. But I'd urge Kevin to continue his studies. We know that the best ticket to success in our economy today is some post-secondary education, whether it's at a community college, whether it's at a four-year institution, and we need that to be able to move our country ahead.
Thanks, Roberto.
All right, let's take another one here from the audience.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jackie Taylor with the National Coalition for Literacy. The president said early on in his speech that he wants us to restore an economy where everyone gets a fair shot and everyone does their fair share and everyone plays by the same set of rules. So how does the president plan to help adults who are not college or job ready to get a fair shot? 30 million American adults don't have the literacy skills to read or complete job applications. Many of them have undiagnosed learning disabilities. So how will we help them get the skills they need to be productive contributors to the economy?
Well, Jackie, I think it's a really good question, and it's a really important point. This is why the president's continued to invest in adult education programs here at the federal level to make sure that those provide a robust network of support for our adults that are going to seek adult basic literacy as well as continuing training. You heard the president tonight also talk about a challenge to really train 2 million more Americans through our community college system and through partnerships between community colleges and American businesses. Our community colleges are institutions across the country serving over 11 million students around the country that are really lifelines to be able to provide continuing education and support. We need to be able to grow more programs at our community colleges and really grow more pathways for our adults to be able to continue to get education and training, begin to build those basic skills, and then transfer those basic literacy skills into really job-relevant skills that can help them land a job on the tail end there. And so the demand for our community colleges is higher than ever, and the president proposed efforts in the past on this. We've invested over $2 billion in our Trade Adjustment Assistance Program to grow community college pathways. The president has proposed buckling down on that as well tonight.
I want to make sure everyone on the panel has a chance to speak, so I think this one is a foreign policy question for Ben. Came in via Google Plus from Miguel Serra, and he asks, what's the president's opinion on a military strategy that strengthens Western alliances in order to further reduce America's spending on its huge military apparatus? And what's his take on the feasibility of a global military alliance to reduce the world's expenditure on local defense in order to increase global investments in other important areas?
Well, it's a great question, Miguel, and it's a very relevant question to a number of the things the President spoke about tonight. You know, for several years now, we've had rapidly increasing defense spending in this country, both in large part because of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also just because of the natural growth in some of our defense programs. So the President, just last month, announced a new defense strategy for the United States that over the next decade will cut nearly $500 billion from our defense budget. This redirects, I think, American national security policy in a fundamental way. And it does two things. In the first instance, it makes it clear that part of the way in which we bring down our deficit has to be bringing down our defense spending. And so therefore, this is a responsible effort, again, to cut $500 billion from our defense budget over the next 10 years. Now, part of those savings will be gained from ending the wars, and we've already ended the war in Iraq completely. We've begun the process of winding down the war in Afghanistan. But it also means making some hard choices about our defense priorities going forward. It means getting rid of the type of weapon systems that we don't need anymore, that are outdated, that were designed for a different time. And it means focusing on the capabilities and the priorities that we have to focus on to keep America safe in the 21st century. The President outlined a couple of those, a number of those, in his defense budget strategy. That includes continuing our counterterrorism efforts, which again have grown more targeted. No more are we having a situation where we deploy large masses of U.S. military force overseas in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. We can continue to degrade al-Qaeda even as we bring our troops home. It also means reorienting our focus to the Asia-Pacific region. This is a rapidly growing region in the world. America has a lot of friends, allies, and partners in that part of the world, a lot of economic interests in that part of the world, and we can have strong security relationships that, again, underpin the stability of the Asia-Pacific region going forward. So we've identified the Asia-Pacific as a priority. But also, we're doing something that Miguel highlights in his question, which is we are investing in alliances, because alliances are force multipliers. We saw in Libya, for instance, the United States did not put a single soldier on the ground, but our allies were able to carry their share of the burden and implement a very successful operation. So working with our NATO allies, we can make sure that different allies in NATO have different capabilities that, again, add up to a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Similarly, in the Asia-Pacific, we're going to have alliances and partnerships, again, where our allies help us with things like disaster response in the aftermath of a tsunami, counterterrorism operations in places like the Philippines and Indonesia, where there have been al-Qaeda affiliates take root in the past. So that, again, America is not bearing all of this burden on our own, but we're working with alliances and partnerships around the globe to also shoulder the cost of these defense priorities. So we're confident that we can, as we've demonstrated over the last 3 years, dramatically bring down the cost of our defense budget, wind down the wars that we've been engaged in, while making sure America remains safe, secure, and the strongest leader in the world going forward.
Great. Okay, thanks, Ben. Now, I've got a lot of questions. We're going to go right here, and I'll get around as much as I can. But I just want to remind folks who are joining us now, we had over 2 million streams for the speech, which is really exciting for us. Well, many of them are hanging around, so I'm sure we get a lot of questions coming in right now. We'll filter through those, but let's take one from the audience here.
Yes, thanks. My name is William Kellebrew with the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and Black Youth Vote. I just actually got a message from the mayor of Spring Lake, and I wanted to just say what he was tweeting me. Wanted to know how a small town like Spring Lake, who's next to Fort Bragg, can get involved in green initiatives to spur their economy, growth in their economy. With the president talking about energy innovation and new incentives, and the Department of Defense, the world's largest consumer of energy, will make one of the largest commitments to clean energy in history. How can a small town like this get involved and get engaged to spur economic growth and protect the environment?
Mark, do you want to take that?
Sure. One of the things, just to reiterate the things that the President talked about, besides the investment in the Department of Defense, that I think there'll be opportunities for businesses and local governments all across the country to take advantage of that, because that will be a rather substantial purchase that the Department of Defense will be engaged in. But the President also made several other points that I think will help reduce the costs for everyone. One, to make a substantial investment in natural gas, to have all of the above strategy in terms of clean energy alternatives. He also noted that in terms of the investments that we're making right now in oil and for natural gas, that we are making a lot of progress in the fight to have these alternatives, whether it's wind or whether it's other alternatives, that's the way for our better economic growth. And that's a priority. He is also making it clear that there should be incentives for businesses and local communities, which this mayor could take advantage of, incentives to retrofit, to save money. And he's calculating that $100 billion over the next several years could be saved by those retrofits. And that's a fundamental investment that our country needs to make for both the public sector and the private sector.
I'd just add one thing, because Fort Bragg is a community the President and the First Lady have both spent a lot of time in. And in addition to the energy efficiency initiative that the President alluded to tonight, which the Department of Defense will take this leadership role in terms of fostering clean energy efficiency, we're doing a number of things to help our base communities as folks come home. Because what we have is huge military communities that have served in Iraq and Afghanistan coming home as the wars come to an end. But we want to make sure that those who choose to leave the military have job opportunities on the other side. Because again, you're going to have folks like in the Army coming back to Fort Bragg who are leaving the military, and we want to make sure that they have the opportunities that they've earned. And I'll highlight 3 quick ways in which we're doing that. Number 1, we're continuing to implement the 21st century post 9/11 GI Bill, where we will help pay for college tuition for members of our military and their families so they get the education and skills they need to find a job. Number 2, part of the Jobs Act that the President proposed last year, one that passed, was the Veterans Tax Credit, again, which helps companies have an incentive to hire American veterans as they come out of the service and enter the workforce. Number 3, the First Lady, through the Joining Forces Initiative, has teamed with the private sector to get commitments from the private sector to hire 100,000 veterans across the country. And these will be businesses that, again, help work with the military and the VA to match up veterans with employment opportunities in communities like those around Fort Bragg. So what we want to make sure is that as our veterans come home from serving abroad, that we enlist them in the work of building our nation at home. Part of that's going to be through energy efficiency opportunities and job creation, like the President spoke about tonight, but there are also a host of opportunities that we're going to pursue, again, by giving people the opportunity and the education they've earned, by giving companies incentives to hire veterans, and by matching up businesses with veterans who are leaving the service so that they can get the jobs that they deserve.
Great. Let me just jump in here, Ann, because some of you may have seen this, but Arnie Duncan just tweeted that he's heading over here. He'll be here in a minute. So I would encourage you, if you have education questions, just sit on them for a minute. You can ask them to him. I got you over there. But if we can take one more, there's definitely some questions out here. Sir, how about you?
Hi, it's good to be here. My name is Cedric Ricks, and I'm with the National Fair Housing Alliance. And first of all, we appreciate the President's appointment of Richard Cordray to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. A lot of us have worked hard to see that happen. And my question, a little background first. Since 2007, the height of the credit crisis, more than 8.9 million homes have been lost to foreclosure. America's housing crisis has disproportionately affected African American and Latino homeowners who've been the targets of subprime lending and other toxic loan products. They are 75% more likely to experience foreclosure than white residents. This is setting families of color back generations in terms of wealth building and their ability to create a bright future for their children. Given the changing demographics of the country, this affects the future prosperity of our nation. None of the solutions to the foreclosure crisis offered to date are currently under discussion, like the AG settlement, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, has effectively addressed this issue. What is the President planning to do to help these families who were unfairly targeted and the first victims of the crisis?
Well, let me tell you two concrete things that the president talked about tonight that he is going to move forward on to help those families get the justice and that they deserve and help turn our housing market around. First, the president asked his attorney general to convene a special unit of leading state attorneys general, as well as federal law enforcement officials in relevant agencies from the SEC to the IRS to the Department of Justice, to come together to investigate mortgage origination and securitization abuses. Those two words are complex words for saying what went wrong in the lending and the packaging of mortgages that we now know is at the heart of our economic crisis. We announced tonight that Attorney General Eric Schneiderman from New York will be a co-chair of this effort and will work with leading attorney generals across the country to make sure that we are fully investigating those issues and bringing the appropriate actions where necessary. Second, the president talked about how we can offer every responsible American family the opportunity to refinance into a lower interest rate loan. This is a very basic idea. I think probably many of you are homeowners. I just recently became a homeowner. It doesn't make any sense when you have interest rates as low as they are today, 4% or lower, that people, millions of families, are stuck in 6-7% mortgages. There was a woman who joined the First Lady in the Box tonight, Joan Milligan from Florida. Because of the actions that have already been taken, she was able to refinance and save a couple $100s a month. If you're able to lower your interest rate by 1% or 2%, that's what you can save. That's real money. As the president said tonight, on average, people save about $3,000 a year when they do this. So the president, again, in terms of concrete action, he is going to be presenting a plan to Congress in the coming days that would allow every responsible American the opportunity to refinance into a lower interest rate loan. That will make a huge difference for a lot of families, and that's something that we want to see action on. Those are two concrete things, two things the president talked about tonight, and I think that we're going to be talking more about housing in the coming days and weeks because, as the president said tonight, the problem is big enough and complex enough that government alone can't solve this, but it is absolutely not the case that government has no role to play and that there is nothing that we can do to help families and to help right our housing market.
Thanks, Brian. Jen, we heard the president talk tonight about some of the cynicism that Americans feel about Congress and their ability to get things done. And one of the questions that just came in on Facebook sort of sums that up. This comes from E. Cosio Rivas, who writes, Mr. President, how do you foresee all of these bills, acts, and proposals being passed by the Republicans and fellow Democrats? What do we say to that?
Well, I would say two things. One is that there's sort of, and we've spent a lot of today, at least in my world, in briefings with the press ahead of the speech. And as you can imagine, this is a question that we get a lot, which is that, you know, the House Republican caucus met this week, and Speaker Boehner indicated that a big priority of theirs would be figuring out ways to attack the president's agenda as opposed to acting on the president's agenda. And it's an election year, obviously, so there's a sense that you can't, that Congress is not going to want to work with the president. And, you know, our experience, I've been here for a whole month, so I can speak with a lot of authority, but I certainly watched the process before I got here. And the experience, I think, from 2011 was the spring and summer was very difficult relationship with the Republicans in Congress, and then you know, and the very difficult fight over the debt limit. But then once you got to the fall, you saw the Republicans in the House and the Senate willing to work with the Democrats and with the president to pass you know, 2 trade bills, to pass a bill that I think Brian referred to that would help get veterans job benefits for tax credits for people who give veterans jobs, as well as as extension on the payroll tax cut and unemployment insurance, albeit for 2 months, but we're confident that we'll eventually get that for the full year. And you never saw a real threat of a shutdown again, and felt that there was a sense among the Republicans in Congress that it was in their interest to work with the Democrats and with the president to get these things done. We think that that opportunity still exists. I worked for President Clinton in 1996 in another re-election year, and at that time the Republicans controlled both houses of Congress, and there was a lot that that was actually a lot of legislation that was passed that year because a calculation was made, I think rightfully so, by the Republicans that the voters expected them to do something, and so we think that the situation with the Republicans on the Hill is actually a little more dynamic than others may observe, and that the president can do a couple of things. He can continue to push them to act. He can continue to put things on the table like he did tonight, which are very common sense proposals that are going to do the things that everybody says they want to do, have more manufacturing, create more jobs, deal with the housing problems. So he'll continue to keep that door open and push to do that, and continue to build support for that in the within the public, and keep that pressure on. And then if but as President of the United States, he does a lot of things. He works with world leaders. He has a lot of authority to do things through executive action, and part of what he does is work with Congress. And if we're not able to get some of these things done with Congress, we're going to do what we can through executive action. And the president took a few actions tonight, some of which Brian outlined. An area of housing with this task force that's going to help with investigation. There's some things that Mark referred to with natural gas and other executive actions the president took tonight that are going to make a change. So he's going to continue to push Congress, but and we think that there's going to be reasons for why they're going to want to work with us. But at the same, but he's not going to wait. He'll continue to take steps through executive action as well.
Great. Okay, I'm going to take one from the middle of the row here. So let me excuse me.
Hi, I'm Frankie Mastrangelo from the American Association of People with Disabilities, and a consistent concern we hear from our followers and our members is employment. Just 33% of people with disabilities are employed compared to 73% of the general population that does not have a disability. This fosters, obviously, dependence on government funding, and this is because of definitions of disability and other factors. What is the administration doing to promote employment opportunities for people with disabilities to reduce this government dependence? Thank you.
Who wants to take that one?
Well, I want to bring it back for a second to the State of the Union, because one of the things in there I think will help not just people with disabilities, but everyone. The president said the current job training programs, which is the gateway, training and job search programs, which is the gateway for many Americans to get a job, is a maze that is very hard for Americans to understand. And what he said tonight was, we are going to streamline this process. So you can go to one website, you can go to one location, you have one program that you can understand to get a job, to find out what kind of training or education that you need. So you don't have to call 10 places or 15 places or 30 places to figure out how to get a job in this country. We have over 3,000 one-stop centers that serve people with disadvantaged backgrounds, with very little job skills, who are returning to the workforce after they've been laid off, or they're dislocated workers, disabled individuals. All of those can go to a one-stop, but it's the best kept secret in America that we have these all over the country, in every community that people don't know about. And so the president will be talking more about this in the coming weeks, about the things that he wants to do to expand job opportunities for everybody. And that's one thing that he can take decisive action, both executive actions and help from Congress.
One other point I'd just make very quickly. I think that, and this is connected to what Mark said, I think that we we have a problem in a lot of the benefit programs for people with disabilities that they are designed actually to discourage work rather than to encourage work, and so they force these terrible choices where if you decide to work, you lose your benefits, or you lose access to the technologies that you need to access your benefits, and it has the impact of exacerbating those statistics rather than ameliorating them. And people with disabilities face unique challenges. The last thing they need is an actual disincentive to go out into the workplace. And so we have a ways to go to solve that problem as well, because that is intimately linked up to what Mark's talking about. Because if you're going to take that step to go out and get training or go out and to get a job, our system of support should encourage those steps, not discourage those. So.
I just say two very quick things. Number one, to speak about one particular population, which is America's wounded warriors and returning veterans, some of whom have very significant disabilities, loss of limbs, sometimes dealing with very traumatic brain injuries. And a lot of our veterans' care and benefits, as well as job programs, are designed to make sure that these veterans, again, are not excluded from the workforce, but actually are given the opportunity to enter into the workforce. That's, again, providing them with world-class medical care, but also, frankly, going out and advocating for them with U.S. businesses. Part of what the First Lady's done through joining forces with these 100,000 jobs is to make the case that these men and women bring certain leadership skills that transcend any disability that they might have. They're leaders, they've had extraordinary experience, they've had extraordinary skills that they've developed in the military. So we want to make sure that some of those people who are welcomed home as heroes when they first get here, again, aren't only not forgotten, but are enlisted and frankly given a privileged role as we advocate with private sector around the country to create jobs. One other very quick thing is the United States under the President's leadership came into the United Nations Convention on Disabilities. Essentially, something that would take the types of protections we have under the American with Disabilities Act and make it global. And frankly, advocating for that and extending that around the globe will help make it possible for some people with disabilities to take those types of jobs that involves travel overseas and work overseas, U.S. jobs, but jobs that sometimes might necessitate their travel, because frankly we see the disabilities workforce globally disadvantaged if other countries don't have the same types of protections we have in the ADA.
Great. We had a question just come in through Google+. I think, Brian, this one will be for you. Comes from Peter McDermott. And he asks, what is the president doing to help young entrepreneurs that are otherwise underemployed get their business ideas off the ground?
It's a great question, and one that we hear a lot about. So a couple of concrete things that the president talked about tonight, and then frankly he's been pushing for a while. You know, one of the things that the president recognized when he came into office was that small businesses and new businesses, frankly, create most of the jobs in this country. And that's common sense for a lot of people, a lot of us who are out in our own communities, and we see it in real time. The small businesses and the newly created ones are the ones where most of our colleagues and friends and family are actually being employed at. But because of the nature of the crisis that we went through, it was not only a recession but a financial crisis. When credit dried up, when access to capital dried up, it was the small businesses that were the last to be able to get back into the game. And so right now, large companies, big corporations are actually able to access credit relatively well. Corporate debt markets are open. Small companies, particularly those who relied on their home or other collateral to get a loan, are still in really tough shape. So, you know, the question that the president has asked the team often is, so what do we do about that? How do we actually get access to credit for more small businesses? You know, one accomplishment, and Jen was talking about areas where, despite the gridlock, we actually have made some progress in this city. The president was able to pass the Small Business Jobs Act in 2010, which put in place a set of tax benefits and credit access programs directly designed to help those types of entrepreneurs. And the president tonight in the State of the Union basically said, let's double down on that. And in particular, let's streamline some of the regulations that get in the way of companies who are trying to access capital for an idea. So a couple things he's talked about. One is an idea that is getting a lot of attention out there from young social entrepreneurs and internet entrepreneurs called crowdfunding, where you're able to use web-based funding mechanisms, some of them nonprofit today, like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, to raise funds in a very disaggregated way. Small dollars from a large number of people or from institutions. Some of the regulations that we have in place keep young entrepreneurs from using those types of mechanisms, growing those types of mechanisms. We'd like to make that easier to do. Likewise, we've seen a dramatic fall in IPOs in this country. And so one of the things the president has talked about is trying to expand what's called the mini IPO, mini offering market by allowing more small firms to go out and raise capital without having to go through the formal process of an IPO. So there are a number of things that we can do, and frankly, those are at the heart of some of the other questions that we've talked about in terms of increasing job growth and wages, because at the end of the day, the way that we are going to grow a sustainable economy is getting capital to those entrepreneurs who have the ideas and getting out of their way when they take an idea and are able to grow with it and create jobs.
Great. Okay, well, we have Joanna, who's from my team, has been patiently waiting against the wall with another microphone. So let's give her a chance to choose somebody with a question who's here as well. All right. There you go.
Janae Ingram with National Action Network, and I have a question out of Houston, Texas. For those people who are over 55 and want to re-enter the employment sector, how are we going about that? What initiatives are there to help people who have either retired or have somehow become disengaged from the workforce get back in there?
Well, a few things. Roberto talked about the president wanting to create 2 million additional jobs in areas that we know there's going to be shortages, and you do it through the community colleges. We have a $2 million commitment that the president got in the reconciliation bill that we've already started, these community college partnerships with private businesses where they team up, and the idea that whether you're a dislocated worker or a second career or new, the idea that you can go to a community college or go to a training program and know that at the end of that program you have an employer there that is ready to hire you, well, that's priceless. And that's what we're looking at, because frankly, we spend too much on training that doesn't always lead to a good job. And this president is insisting that when we put public dollars up to help people get a job and get trained for a job, that we're holding them accountable. And that whether you're a four-year college or whether you're a proprietary school or whether you're a community college, it doesn't matter. The president wants you to get good value. He wants the price of that to be reasonable. And he's willing to say that just like large companies leverage their purchasing to get a better deal, that he's willing to use the aid that we give to the colleges to say you have to be responsible and provide good value to the students that are going there. And in return for doing that, you're going to hold your prices down, and we'll continue to give the aid. But it's a quid pro quo. We want to see more responsibility for these programs. But the president identified today that the community colleges, obviously in partnership with four-year colleges and other educational opportunities, are the key to filling those healthcare jobs, filling those information technology jobs.
Yeah, just to add to that, I'd say much of our education work is framed by the president's goal that he set for us back in 2009 to say that by the end of this decade, we are going to lead the world with the highest proportion of college graduates. That means we have to move from about 40% to over 60% in terms of our share of college graduates as a nation. And right now, that means that we're going to have to produce 11 million additional college grads. We won't be able to get there if we're not opening pathways to college career for adults. And so some of the reforms that Mark mentioned here really build on a lot of what the president's already done to really increase access and affordability. for adults to be able to go back to college. That includes looking at expanding the Pell Grant and doing that by over $819 over the past 3 years, so that that's a more reliable source of aid, not only for continuing education at a 4-year institution or a 2-year institution, but also for continuing training. It's also why the president called tonight to make permanent the American Opportunity Tax Credit. That's worth $10,000 over 4 years to be able to go to college. And that's real money in the pockets of Americans to be able to really fulfill their higher education opportunity.
Here's a question that I thought was pretty interesting. Came from Google, from Michael Habib. And he asks, how does the current administration hope to balance their verbal commitment to greater industrial efficiency, which carries huge benefits, but also tends to carry an intrinsic reduction in required human labor, with a simultaneous commitment to increase national rates of employment? Mr. Deese.
It's a great question, actually. And one of the things that you can get me talking a lot about is energy efficiency in buildings and industrial facilities. So I will try to keep it brief. I actually think the question that Michael poses was posed as perhaps there is a trade-off between if you make a factory, I think, to break it down, if you make a factory more energy efficient, does that by definition mean that there are going to be fewer jobs? And so maybe you've saved some energy, but you've ended up with fewer jobs. I think that what we found, and this is true both in the industrial sector, so in factories, but also in the commercial building sector, so in office buildings and the like, is that actually not only the act of making those facilities more energy efficient, but the ongoing maintenance involved in energy efficiency technology is a job creator. So, I'll just give you one very tangible example. A few months ago, the president went across the street, just around the block, to a building where they're upgrading the energy efficiency of a couple of floors of a commercial building. And you went in there, and what you saw was this is a really sophisticated high-tech construction site. And these were workers who lost their jobs because we had a massive housing crisis, which hit commercial real estate really hard. And these were jobs going in and putting in really energy efficient windows, putting in very high technology boilers in the top of the building, where there were tens of thousands of man hours involved in putting in these machines, and on an ongoing basis to operate them. There are good jobs involved, engineering jobs and the like. And what's exciting about it is that the owner of the building was more than happy to make the investment, because even though he was paying workers and to make these upgrades, the reduction in cost associated with his energy bill was going to pay off in 3 or 4 years. And so you have one of these things that really is a unique win-win in our economy, where you're able to actually reduce the energy intensity of our economy, save businesses money, and create good jobs at the same time. And so that's why the president talked about it. The president sometimes, when we do events on these issues, he jokes that energy efficiency isn't the sexiest issue in the world. But it really is a job creator, and particularly in an environment where we have double-digit unemployment rates in our construction sector, we have to do everything that we can to try to figure out how to create good jobs in that area, and energy efficiency is a real opportunity.
Great. So, okay, perfect. Thanks. So we have a lot of questions here, but I've actually just got something in that I think you guys will find interesting. Let me see. How about talk over here? So just as a reminder to the folks watching, you can ask questions by tweeting at the White House and using the hashtag SOTU, heading over to our page on Facebook, on Google+. And then we have a whole week of engagement. So if you didn't get your questions answered tonight, head over to whitehouse.gov/SOTU, and you can get all the details about what's happening. The Vice President's going to be doing a Twitter chat, and of course the President's going to be doing a pretty great event on Monday that we're all really excited about. But if I can just bring up these slides here. Let's see if this works. Boom. Okay, great. So our good friends at Twitter were actually paying attention to the hashtag SOTU and sent us just 3 quick stats that I think are pretty interesting. The first is just the total number of tweets that came in during the event, 650,000 or so. The next one, all right, is tweets per minute. So we'll match this up with the speech, but it's kind of interesting how the rates go up and down throughout the speech. And then the final one, which I think will be, Sarah, are we good? Yes. This is a great way to introduce our next guest. If you go to the next slide and you look at the topics of messages, even though I think the president spent a large amount of time talking about jobs, he talked about energy policy, he talked about fairness, the #1 topic on Twitter was education. And that is a great introduction for the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan.
Yes, we have joining us Secretary Arne Duncan from the Department of Education. And Secretary, you just came straight from the Capitol, where you were in the room when the President gave the State of the Union. And we heard him talk a lot about education. Tell us a little bit about the experience of being there and some of your first impressions on the speech.
First of all, you always pinch yourself. It's a little surreal. It's sort of mind-boggling being in there, but it's inspiring. And this is, we're fighting for our country here. And the president said repeatedly, this is our national mission. We have to educate our way to a better economy. And I think he laid out the vision from, attracting and retaining great teachers to making sure the college dream is part of the middle-class promise, that it's not just for wealthy folks. Retraining folks who have been working for years, may have got laid off, come back to community colleges. We always talk about this cradle-to-career continuum. So we've got a lot of hard work ahead of us, but it's an amazing opportunity. And just to be part of it, I can't tell you how much it means to me personally.
Well, Macon, do we want to get a question from the audience?
We have one or two?
What do you think? Yeah? The audience good? Education question? Okay, now I owe him a question as well, so I'll come back to you actually, because he had his hand up before the speech even ended. You guys all know that. You saw it. So let's hand it over to you, and then we'll get back around the audience here.
My question's for Secretary Duncan. By the way, Larry Burns, a Chicago native. I live in Atlanta now, and I teach high school history and political science. First thing I want to say is I affectionately refer to my students as scholars, and I promised them that they would get priority with these questions. So this was one of my scholars, and she simply tweeted, "Yay for education. Teachers do matter." I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. That came from a student. My question real quick is, I was blown away when President Obama, I want to read exactly what he said, in return grant schools flexibility to teach with creativity and passion, to stop teaching to the test, and to replace teachers who just aren't helping kids learn. I want to address that teaching to the test. It is a bona fide problem. I can tell you as a teacher, there's been more than once. We call our tests that wrap up the semester in the state of Georgia EOCTs. They stand for end of course test. Unfortunately, we get one semester to teach all of U.S. history and one semester to teach all of world history. And I can tell you from the front lines on more than one occasion, I've had a tremendous idea for something I wanted to do, and I simply had to say, I do not have 3 days to spend on this because I've got to get this material covered, because an end-of-course test, which right now is 15% of their overall grade, and it's about to jump to 20%, is looming. The other thing very quickly is that I don't know any teacher, myself included. I'm not going to walk across the hallway and ask another teacher for a test on World War II. I don't know how they presented that material. I don't know how they emphasized. So we're preparing a very, very heavily weighted test that we had nothing to do with in preparation. So at the very least, just real quick suggestion, maybe we could bring this, just so I'm not the type of person that bringing up a problem, not maybe a solution. Give us the ability, if you want to have an end-of-course test, we're trained professionals, we can write them on the local level.
First of all, just thank you so much for your service. And the president talks all the time about the importance of great teachers, what it meant in his life, what it meant in my life. What he said today, in Congress, it's absolutely true. Every single one of us can point to those teachers who pulled things out of us that we didn't know we had in us, and we wouldn't be where we are without that. So that's something he just deeply, deeply believes in. But with Roberto and Mark and our partners at the Domestic Policy Council, we're trying to move away from the No Child Left Behind, focus just on reading and math, the narrowing of the curriculum, which is a huge problem. We're looking to provide waivers to states. We hoped Congress would fix No Child Left Behind together in a bipartisan way. That didn't happen. But literally this evening, I was on the phone with the team from Georgia working through Georgia's waiver application, and they're working really, really hard. And so we want to be a good partner, and everywhere we go, we talk about a well-rounded, world-class education. Yes, reading and math are really important, but science and social studies and dance and drama and PE and art and music, all those things are important, and we have to get back to that. On No Child Left Behind, we focused on those couple subjects we tested in, led to a narrative of the curriculum. That's the biggest complaint I hear as I travel the country.
Great. And do you have one?
Yeah, a question just came in on Twitter from David Carter, who writes, supporting community colleges sounds like a great idea, but they're local. Why should federal government do it instead of a state or city?
Well, states and cities should do it, but I think we ought to be partners here. And the fact of the matter is that everyone's stretched for resources. Probably my most inspiring visits to schools around the country are to community colleges. You have 18-year-olds and 58-year-olds and people from countries all over the globe, and all working together to improve themselves. And so we've partnered with the Department of Labor, put out $2 billion, $500 million a year over 4 years, where there's strong public-private partnerships, where the training you're receiving in community colleges is leading to a real job in green energy, healthcare, technology, whatever it might be, and we all have to invest. We have community colleges now that are actually open 24 hours a day. They're going 3-4 shifts, literally taking classes 24 hours a day. There's tremendous demand. We have to continue to increase quality, but make sure they have the capacity to help everybody going back to school. And so I think we all have a role to play, and if we can help the great work in local communities, we have to do that. I feel really proud about our ability to step in there and help increase capacity.
Great. So I know it's getting late in the hour, and I know you probably still got more work to do, Mr. Secretary. But
I'll take a couple more.
Okay, great. So we'll take a couple more. We'll kick back to the audience, and then maybe we can get a few more from online.
Hi, my name is Annie Rose Strasser. I work with the Campaign for Community Change, and we advocate for low-income people of color specifically. And the president tonight in his speech talked about encouraging states to keep kids in school until graduation. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about basically how you would ensure the effectiveness of that policy and how it would have an impact on low-income communities of color specifically.
Well, I think where the president starts is today, if folks drop out of high school, they are basically condemned to poverty and social failure. There are no good jobs out there in the legal economy, and that's changed. I'm not that old, but when I was in high school in the south side of Chicago about 30 years ago, my friends actually, it wasn't great, but they could drop out of high school, and they could get a good paying job in the stockyards and steel mills and buy a home and support a family. And those jobs are a distant memory from a bygone era. And we know in many of our minority communities, dropout rates are closer to 40, 50%. For the country right now, it's about 25%, 25 to 30, and we're losing 1 million young people from our schools to our streets each year. And that is economically unsustainable, and it's morally unacceptable. And so I think the president's challenging all of us to say that that's just not a viable option. There's just nothing out there for you, and we all have to work together to keep young people in school. And let me be really clear, for me, graduating from high school is just a starting point. That's not an ending point. You need some form of higher education beyond that. 4-year universities, 2-year community colleges, trade, technical, vocational training, but particularly children of color, children from disadvantaged communities, that has to be the aspiration. That has to be the norm rather than the exception. But it all starts with graduating from high school. And if you don't have that, doors shut on you very, very quickly.
Great. Here's a question that came in online about student loans from Michael Calvillo, who writes on behalf of his brother. And he says, my brother has recently finished his master's degree, but his financial future is very much in doubt because of the huge burden of student loans. What can the president do to help alleviate such burdens on our future leaders?
So there's 3 parts of this. One thing we've done on the front end is we stopped subsidizing banks, took all that money, put it into Pell Grants, an additional $40 billion over the next decade in Pell Grants, the biggest increase since the GI Bill. And we have maximum rates at $5,550. We've gone from 6 million people benefiting from Pell Grants just 2 or 3 years ago to 9 million today, a 50% increase. So on the front end, we've worked really, really hard. On the back end, which is where they're talking about now, we put in place something called income-based repayment, IBR. And again, simply by stopping subsidizing folks, not going to taxpayers for a nickel, are reducing loan repayments going forward so that you pay according to how much you earn. If you earn a lot more money, if you're in a lucrative profession, you pay more. If you're in public sector, if you're teaching, you pay less. You pay 10% of your earnings, and that can help the average person put another couple $100 back in their pocket each month and help pay the rent or, buy groceries or, pay the gas bill or whatever it might be. So we're working really hard on the front end and the back end. What you heard from the President tonight in the State of the Union is him challenging colleges and universities in tough economic times to keep down their tuition. And if we increase Pell Grants, but they just increase tuition, then students don't benefit there. So we've worked really hard on the front end, feel great about that. Lots of movement on the back end, but we have to get colleges and universities to step up and be full and equal partners. That's tough to do in tough economic times, but as he talked about tonight, lots of universities around the country that right now are flatlining tuition, or keeping it flat, even reducing it, going to 3-year programs, going to no-frills universities, using technology, no-frills campuses, using technology in really innovative ways. And we want to continue to foster that and support that. And where folks aren't doing that, when tuition is skyrocketing much higher than the rate of inflation, we have to challenge that status quo.
Great. Okay, it's time for another Joanna round. So everybody turn and look at her and put her on the spot. Here we go.
For Secretary Duncan. In the last 2 years, there have been several states, especially Texas and Georgia, they've taken content, this is a question I've got about content, they've taken historical context out of place, say that slavery didn't exist, or they've made missteps with historical facts in this country. Now, my home state of Tennessee is joining the bandwagon of taking out things that did happen in this country. And I think to piggyback on, I guess, the comments, when you look at a high disproportionate amount of young black males that do drop out of college, out of high school, because, for example, if the content isn't properly given, and if they don't see that anything in this country, in the educational system, relates to them, then they don't feel there's a need to be bothered at all. So is there any system in place to make sure there's a national system of education? I know, we believe in states' right, believe let the states handle it, but if you have Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, and then you have a slew of other states that, are in a sense changing history, then you have another case in Georgia where, you've got math teachers, asking if 57 slaves picked 8, apples, how many would you have? When you have things like that, I know teachers are given license or want to have license, but when it affects a lot of students, in a sense, negatively, then how does that happen, and what can be done to let there be some national blueprint that the states can follow, so you're not having 50 different educational systems?
There are many, many things that were broken with the No Child Left Behind law. One of the things that I think was most insidious, and I don't think this was intentional, but what many states did is they actually dummied down standards to conform with the law. So they reduced standards, including the state I'm from Illinois. And what we've tried to do, rather than mandating something or saying states have to do that, we put some significant carrots out there for states to raise standards, college and career-ready standards. And as the President talked about, for a relatively small amount of money, huge movement. 46 states have now adopted internationally benchmarked college and career-ready standards. And literally, for the first time in this country's history, a child in Mississippi and a child in Massachusetts going forward is going to be measured by the same yardstick. This is a game changer. It's particularly a game changer for disadvantaged communities where those standards always get dummied down the most. So we're never going to dictate standards. We've put some carrots out there, and states have understood we have to race to the top. We can't, reduce things. But now we're going to have better assessments coming behind that are being developed and led by the state level, and then better curriculum will follow from that. So higher standards, more thoughtful assessments, much better curriculum. So there's not something we can mandate or dictate, but the country's moving at a much more rapid pace than.
Sponsored by the Tea Party. So when you have special interest groups.
So I don't know if we can get rid of the Tea Party. I'm not quite sure that's our role. I'm all for democracy. But I do think it's important for people's voices to be heard. I do think it's important to have high standards. I think it's important that states understand the only way they're going to keep good jobs in their states is if they have an educated workforce. And a couple years ago, if you would have asked anybody, would 46 states voluntarily adopt college and career standards, they would have said you were crazy. And this is bipartisan. And this thing has happened, again, because we put significant carrots out there and the president's shown tremendous leadership and courage on this issue.
Okay, Ann, why don't you take one more from online, and then we'll wrap it up with one from the one from here, but with a challenge. I know a lot of you are here for the tweet up, so if someone can pose a question that they're getting through Twitter, so hit up. Yeah, okay, we already have them. So let's look for a question like that, and let's get one from you, and then we'll wrap it up from the room.
Great. I thought this was a great question that came in actually during the president's speech from Tony Overby in Brandon, Mississippi. And he wrote, "Our faulty public education system is a major problem in the country today. If we don't fix this educational crisis, we are setting America up for failure. What changes can be made to the public school system? How far are we willing to go to make sure everyone, not just those students headed for college, are being educated properly? What can we change for the 21st century public education system? And what can we do to make it the best in the world?"
So this is a long answer, and I'll try and shorten it. There isn't a simple answer. So let me start. For me, it all begins with really high-quality early childhood education. If we can get our 3- and 4-year-olds off to a great start and have them enter kindergarten ready to read and ready to learn, then we can really start to seriously close achievement gaps. And we're making major investments there in partnership with HHS. The president talked tonight about great teachers, great principals. I can't overstate how important that is. As we lose about 1 million teachers, baby boomers retiring, our ability to attract and retain great talent over the next 4, 5, 6 years is going to shape public education for the next 30. It's truly a generational shift. We have to challenge parents. Parents have to take responsibility. They have to turn off the Wiis, turn off the TVs, spend time with their children, partner with teachers. Every parent has to be part of that solution. My wife and I have 2 young children at home, and we try and push ourselves to be real good partners with our children's school. Young people themselves, I always say this is their job, is to get a good education. This is not just a lark or something they can do when they feel like it. Young people have to be absolutely committed to getting a good education. And then ultimately for me, again, the pre-K to 12 experience is simply preparing you for that next step in the education journey, whatever it might be. And the opportunity to go to college has to be affordable, has to be accessible to the middle class. And what the president worries about, what the vice president worries about, what I worry about is that for too many middle class folks, that dream of going to college has gotten harder and harder. We have to look at this cradle to career continuum. There is not one simple answer, but we're pushing as hard as we can. And just quickly, on the sense of urgency, I talked about the dropout rate, which is staggering. But one generation ago, we led the world in college graduates, and today we're 16th. So 15 other countries have passed us by. They are out educating us, they are out innovating us, and then we wonder why we struggle economically. We have to break through, and we have to look at it this cradle to career continuum.
Great. Okay, so we'll take the last question here. Take it from you.
Hi, my name is Tyler Sidonis. I'm a undergraduate student at American University, and one of the tweets that I got from a classmate of mine who just graduated this past year, I'm going to read it to Secretary Duncan, and thank you for your time for coming here. The question is, it says, "I absolutely applaud changes for current student loan rates, but would those also count towards those who graduated? Thank you."
What we're trying to do again is have those loan repayments going forward, have those be reduced to 10% of income. So again, if you're making more money, you pay back more. If you're making less money, you pay back less. And what I didn't say is that if you go into the public service, if you're become a teacher, if you're working at a nonprofit, a legal aid clinic, a medical clinic, after 10 years, that debt will be erased, will be forgiven. We want to bring that great talent into the public sector. So we're trying to work really hard there as well.
Okay, so we're going to wrap things up for the evening. I know it's late. I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank everyone online for tuning in. Thanks Secretary Duncan and the rest of our panel for participating. Few reminders. Don't know if you caught it earlier. For those of you tuning in, first off, the entire speech is about to start playing again, so stay online. Anyone here who wants to see it for the second time is welcome to stay. But that's going to start playing. And then we have a week's worth of online engagement activities. All the details at whitehouse.gov/State of the Union. Vice President Biden's going to participate, and President Obama is going to wrap it up next Monday. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.